In this demonstration, we're now going to go about creating and deploying ARM templates. And to begin with, we're going to start out in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we're in Visual Studio Code and we can see the basic layout of an ARM template that I've got on screen at the moment. And if you look at it, you can see there's 6 major sections, 4 of which we covered previously, but notice the syntax for each of them. So for the schema, we simply reference the deployment template.json schema that's available from Microsoft. If you're unsure where to get this, if we head over to the Microsoft Azure website, and we can see under resource group authoring templates with the link on screen that the schema is listed there, and this is the location of the JSON schema that describes the version of the template language that we're using. And if you ever want to grab the latest template format, you can go to this link and grab it from there. But we'll head back over to Visual Studio. Next we have our content version, so we could simply give this version 1.0.0.0, and it's always 4 numbers that we need to put in there, and this is up to us to version if we want to. And then we have those 4 major sections. You'll notice parameters use the open curly braces, the variables use the same, resources are defined in the square brackets there, and then outputs, same in the curly braces. But let's actually go ahead and look at an actual example. So I've opened up an Azure ARM example that we can see, and this is one you can get from those quick start templates that I referenced earlier in the tutorials. And again, we can see we've got our schema, our content version. I've not declared any parameters or variables yet. Everything I'm doing, I'm declaring in the resource block that you can see in the middle of the screen. So let me just walk you through this section one at a time. So the first piece I've got is the name of the resource. So in this case, I'm going to concatenate, so that's add storage, plus a unique string related to the resource group ID. So this is going to create a new storage account name directly for me. The type, this is the resource provider we're utilizing. So again, I'm using Microsoft.storage as my provider, and I'm using the storage accounts resource type from there. Then I've got my API version. So this helps because as Microsoft evolves their services, they will update the APIs, and you're able to reference those by using the API version in this particular area. Then we have our SKU. So these are some of the things that are required as I provision my storage account. So in this case, I'm using standard LRS for locally redundant storage. My kind is storage. That's the type of account. It's this particular piece related to storage, and you probably saw that in the storage accounts section of our tutorials. And then the location I want to put it in, so North Central US. Any tags, I haven't declared any at the moment, and any additional properties. And that's basically the entire ARM template, and I've saved it as armexample.json. So let's go over to PowerShell and see how we would deploy something as basic as this, which is to create a storage account. Okay, so I'm over in PowerShell now, and the first thing I need to do before I can use the PowerShell commandlet, which in this case will be new Azure RM resource group deployment, so feel free to Google that now if you want to. But before I can use it, I do need to create a resource group. So in this case, let's create a brand new resource group. So I'm going to declare it as a variable, so $RG equals, and I'm going to do a new Azure RM resource group with the name SL-ARM demo in the location North Central US. Okay, so that's created. If I do $RG, I should see I've got my SL-ARM demo resource group name there. And now let's go ahead and do our deployment. So in this case, I'm going to do a new Azure RM resource group deployment. And I need to select a resource group name. Now this needs to be the string for the resource group. So what I can do is reference the variable $RG period the resource group name, followed by the name of our deployment, so this could be any name you want to give it, so we could just call this deployment 1. And then the last thing I need is my actual template file, so I reference this with -template file. And you can just tab through these if you want. So in my case, armexample.json, hit enter. And that will go ahead and start deploying. And what we can do now is go over to the Azure portal, go over to our resource groups. You can see our SL-ARM demo there, and refresh a few times. And after a little while, we can see our storage account has been created. Okay, but now we decide we want to take that same ARM template and we want to make the SKU name for the storage. So, we used standard LRS before. We don't want to declare it in the ARM template. We want to offer it up as a parameter. So let's go back over to Visual Studio Code. And what we need to do first of all is take a look at our area in the bottom here where we've got SKU name standard LRS. Now, instead of us declaring it directly there as a string, we're going to reference it as that parameter I mentioned. So first we need to do is eliminate this and say we want to reference a parameter. So quote parameters, and then we'll call the SKU name the parameter we're going to reference. And we'll just give that a capital N so we can see it more easily. And that's the parameter we're going to reference, but nothing's obviously going to work yet because we haven't declared this parameter. So let's go up to the parameter section and let's add a new parameter right here. So let's call it SKU name, followed by a colon, and let's open up our curly braces and let's give this type string. And that is it for this file itself. Now, we know we want to pass that parameter in, but how do we do it if we want to declare it in a file as well? So let's go ahead and create a new file. And let's go ahead, and the first thing we need to do is copy the schema across. So we can go back over to our ARM example. Let's grab the top section. Put that in there. I'm just going to set this to JSON. And now, if we change something at the top, we know the template is deployment template. Well, in this case, it's actually going to be deployment parameters. We can leave the content version as is. We can leave the parameters initial section as is. But where we've got the SKU name, all we need to do now is change this to value. And now we can give it the different SKUs that we want. So in this case, we're going to say standard, and let's do LRS again. So we'll deploy a new account with standard LRS, and we can add one more. So we don't need this comma here because we don't have another parameter we're adding. But let's get rid of that and check everything through. That all looks good. So let's save that. So let's call this Azure deploy parameters.json. I've actually already got one in there, so I'm going to override that. And we've got that saved. Let's just make sure we save our ARM example. And we're ready to go ahead and deploy now. So let's go back over to PowerShell. And same thing, but with a few variations that we need to incorporate. And I've just cleared the screen. And what we need to do is if we reference our previous deployment, we can still see there with the armexample.json, but the only thing I'm going to add is a template parameter file. So we use dash template parameter file. And now if I tab through, I can see all my different JSON files, but I'm going to use my Azure deploy.parameters.json and hit enter to deploy that, and I should see a second storage account get deployed also with standard LRS, but this time I haven't declared it in the resource body, I've declared it in this parameters file. And last thing we just need to do before we hit enter is go over to Azure and just delete the previous storage account we created because we gave it a unique name of storage combined with the resource group ID, so it's not going to be able to succeed. It'll think we're talking about the same storage account. So let's go ahead and delete that first of all. Okay, and back over to PowerShell. Let's go ahead and hit enter now. and let that deployment go off. And now back to the portal into our resource group. And let's refresh. We can see on the right hand side it's currently showing one deploying, one succeeded, so we should see it any moment. And after a little while, there we are. We can see that our storage account has appeared with the same name because it's still using that unique string with the resource ID, combined with, if we go into deployments, we can look through here and look at deployment 1 again, and we can see our template and look at everything that was inside our ARM template, as well as look on the left under parameters. We can expand that out and see that we used the parameters file and we included the SKU name that way. And hopefully that gives you a good background on ARM templates. That concludes this demonstration. For the exam, just know that you need to be able to sort of read and interpret ARM templates, and in some cases they'll give you questions where you have to kind of take pieces of code and choose which one makes the most sense for the question.